Awesome. Alrighty, here we are again with AmeriCorps Connections, and I'm so excited I was able to wrangle in another AmeriCorps alumni. So it's not hard to do. We all want to get together and talk with each other. So it's been a lot of fun connecting. So welcome to AmeriCorps Connections. This is where we get to catch up with AmeriCorps alumni, reminisce about their service year, and then also get to know what they're up to now. So I'm Nikki Fiacco, and I'm a proud AmeriCorps alum from 2011 to 2012. I've served in Maryland at the program Volunteer Maryland, and now I'm just a passionate alumni nut that just really wants to pull together this network and just see what we can do and where we can go from here. So before we get started, I did want to give this shout out to my producer that is well, he's not totally producing, he's helping me. Dan Medevere, who is also an alumni, an AmeriCorps alumni, and his organization is called From Time or Money Productions, and he is the one who has helped me make sure that this gets out on all of the platforms. And thank you, Dan, for troubleshooting at like 11 o'clock at night on the East Coast, and he's in the West Coast. So he usually is coming in and I'm practically crying because I can't figure out how to do an edit. And he's like, oh, download the video, then you can separate the MP4. I was like, oh my gosh, you're a genius. So I wake up to his genius in the mornings when he answers my questions. So anyways, Dan Medevere from Time or Money Productions. Thank you. And thank you for all the other alumni who have helped me troubleshoot through some things. I really appreciate it. That's the only way we're going to get this thing out, but I'm getting better, getting more efficient. So today we are here with alumni Gia Grier McGinnis. I did it.
Yeah,
I did it. And she was an AmeriCorps alumni VISTA, right? You served in AmeriCorps VISTA. And your portfolio is just so steeped with your journey through academia, and you're still in academia now. So I'd love for you to kind of go through the process of how you got into your service and then what you're up to now. And it's kind of cool as we have these conversations because our careers have kind of intersected in some ways. And we have similar following. And fun fact, we're working together currently on a project that it will be taking off in June. So very excited to have this conversation. So Gia, take us on your journey.
So thanks so much for having me. And this is a wonderful project that you're doing, just bringing AmeriCorps alums together, because there are so many of us around the country and around the world even. But my journey into public service started, after college. So I originally went to Washington College for environmental studies, and knew that I didn't really want to go right into a graduate program. Up until then, during my 4 years of college, I was really into community service. So I worked at Washington College in the Career Center as a work study student, because that's where service learning was at the time, and was helping to do campus-wide service programming, and was really a service geek. And so it was through the Career Center that I learned about AmeriCorps, and that people could do these kind of national service programs after college as a way of just taking a gap. So I said, that's what I'm going to do before I go to grad school. And because I was an environmental studies major, I wanted something that would still help reinforce my career goals, almost like a short-term job, though it's not.
Yeah, right. Not, we don't say that.
It's not a job. But I still want something that could help build my resume. And so I specifically was searching the AmeriCorps website for environmentally related placements. And VISTA was the one that I knew about. I eventually learned there were other branches of AmeriCorps, but VISTA was the one that I was told about. So I was looking at VISTA ones, and I saw this one that was sponsored by the US EPA, which was a little unusual because most of them were nonprofits, and this one was kind of a partnership between the US EPA and a nonprofit in DC called the Children's Environmental Health Network. And so I applied for it. And I found out that the EPA at the time had other AmeriCorps placements that were all designed to run something called the Student Environmental Development Program, which was an EPA Region 3 effort to expose middle school students in cities in their region to environmental concepts. And I thought, that's cool.
Yeah, I thought that's cool.
That's cool. Also, because I had been exposed to environmental education as a child, that's actually what got me motivated to go into the environmental field. So to me, it felt very full circle to work on a project with young people from urban areas that really didn't know much about the environment, but what a cool thing to expose them to. So I signed up and I went to Region 3 to interview. So I went to EPA Region 3 headquarters in Philadelphia for the interview.
Oh, wow.
And I met Larry Brown, who was working at the EPA at the time, and SCDP was his baby. And so I interviewed with him and I got the position. And so my placement wasn't in Philadelphia. It was actually in Washington, D.C., because he had formed a partnership with the Children's Environmental Health Network. So the on-the-ground partner for managing the logistics, whereas the nonprofits, not the EPA. So he was very much in touch with me throughout the year. So I went to work at the network and got to work with the person who is still now the ED of the Children's Environmental Health Network, though at the time she was the associate director, Nsedu Obot Witherspoon, who's a big leader in the field, still going at the network. She's really great. And there was another VISTA place there as well. And our job was really to manage the program. So we would recruit environmental professionals to give talks to the youth. They went to GW every day for 6-7 weeks. So we got to plan their field trips also with buses.
And for the folks that aren't on the East Coast, GW's George Washington University.
Yes, that's right.
Yes. I know those acronyms well now.
Right. Yes, of course you did, because you're
I'm getting there.
And so, yeah, it was just a great year. And it was a good way to, again, like just reinforce my interest in the environmental field and work with another VISTA, and also get to go to some hearings. So the network was on Capitol Hill. I think it's still, their offices are still there. And so they would have participate in informational hearings on children's environmental health issues. So I would get to sit in and listen to those. So it was also a great exposure to policy issues, which wasn't the placement, but it was kind of like a bonus.
The experience, right? And that I think that is like such a bonus, to use your words, of a service year, is that like there's the service that you're doing, but there's so much more involved in included in, professional development opportunities to go to Capitol Hill. Even any AmeriCorps member can actually go down and educate our politicians on what AmeriCorps is.
Educate.
Never. So that's, was there anything during your service year that was really like an interaction with a youth or a speaker or something that just kind of knocked your socks off and you were like, okay, wow, this is cool?
Yeah. So the end of the program, so it's 6-7 weeks. The youth are getting all these talks and going on all these trips. And at the very end, they get to do this presentation at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Training Center, which is this really awesome facility in West Virginia. And I remember just listening to their presentations and watching these kids who didn't know anything about environmental issues just kind of like stand up there and present to these officials. And it would just, I just remember this one girl, like she was just like talking about sun safety, and she was really owning, and she knew it, she knew all the facts about sun safety, and she's like, just because you're black doesn't mean everyone needs sunscreen too. And I was like, that's right. Like,
and that's so cool, because you were able to develop that and give them the opportunity to learn and make those connections. That's so powerful. Do you still stay in contact with the VISTA that you worked with, or
not
so much?
We went our separate ways. So from there I went on to University of Michigan and then went on to another program as well. So
Wow. And is there anybody that was there a challenging time during your VISTA program? Like,
I mean,
let's not go off the rails.
no. I think it was an interesting partnership. So it was still the EPA's kind of program, though the network was responsible for the logistics. And so at times you were kind of talking with the EPA person, but still had on the ground things to do. And like the government had certain rules and just trying to navigate government bureaucracy. Because at one point, I think we got to help write a grant for them at one point. And so it was learning about all that government bureaucracy stuff. It was interesting.
Yeah. And navigating the two different, because we always have, we're never going to just be, talking to one individual about one thing.
Right.
We have several people that we're always accountable for in our lives, in our professional lives, even if you're a business owner, right? Like, you still have to, whoever your service is going out to. So you had mentioned that after is there anything else that you wanted to point out or reflect on during your VISTA year?
It was just awesome because the Children's Environmental Health Network, it's not like a mega big organization like the World Wildlife Fund. It's a relatively small nonprofit. It still is. And so I got to see the inner workings of a small scale nonprofit. So I'm sharing the office with the VISTA and then the person that did all the finances for the organization, and like just learning about money management, like I could hear her talking about finances and things. So it was really interesting just to get exposure to a small nonprofit environment also.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a lot of exposure to a lot of different things. That's
Yeah.
very, very, very cool and exciting, and positions you perfectly for what you've been doing in the last decade of your life. So you mentioned you went to University of Michigan. That's where you got your master's, right?
Right. So, and again, so this was kind of a gap, but I knew I wanted to go on for the master's. And at the time, during my AmeriCorps year, I was also applying to graduate school. And I eventually get into University of Michigan, and they have an environmental justice program.
Okay.
And so, and at the time, now, environmental majors are now very popular at grad level, but at the time, there were only a couple of universities that had a formalized environmental justice program at master's level. So it wasn't actually the easiest thing to find back then. So Michigan had one of the first formalized environmental justice programs in the country. So a lot of the people like Paul Mohai and Dorceta Taylor and all these kind of scholars in the field of environmental justice were working at Michigan at the time. Bunyan Bryant, so people that know environment, you're like, that's it.
I'm like, I trust
These are
you.
people that like, but so it was kind of like cool to like meet these people who were considered some of the original researchers in the field, and to
trailblazers.
And to kind of learn from them and kind of learn about the historical background of the movement of environmental justice. And then while I was there, Michigan had two options for your master's opus. You could either do a traditional research paper, or you could work with a team and do a team-based project. So my team, we did an environmental justice assessment of Dearborn, Michigan, and worked with a nonprofit partner there to do that. So that was a really great, it was research, but it was practical for the partner. So I left that program feeling like I didn't just do research to do research. It was kind of research in action and helping a community at the same time.
That's such a great way of finishing out a school, right? Like just leaving behind something that an organization can do something with. That's very exciting. And it feels like, okay, I can go out and do what, put my money where my mouth is. Like I've done this before. Yeah. That's great. So University of Michigan, and then did you go to Morgan, or was that wasn't right away?
That was actually way later. So I left
yeah.
Michigan And I took a lot of electives in public health while I was at Michigan because the program was flexible with your electives. So a lot of people kind of subspecialized to their electives. And when I left, I had no idea I wanted to pursue more school. That wasn't a plan at the time. Was
You're
a
like,
thought.
I'm good.
Yeah, no, it's actually literally like, I'm good. Like I'm, but I said, yeah, if I ever did go back, I'd go back for a public health degree because I took all these electives and it was interesting. And, but I was just like, but I'm done with school, right? So
I really like,
moving
I
on.
like how the study of public health and environment is meshed. And I think,
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not going to speak for you, but I feel like your VISTA year was kind of that, like, oh, like this
yes,
can come together. Like I can be an expert in the field of environmentalism,
yep,
but it really has an impact on public health on all
yes,
these different ways. And I feel
yeah,
like right now is a time where we really need to know
yeah,
that, right?
yeah,
Like we really need to know that the environment has a massive impact and your
yes,
zip code matters and
yep,
on your health.
yep,
So
absolutely.
definitely.
Yeah.
And then so what did you do after
Right,
University of
right.
Michigan?
So I leave Michigan. I do a summer public service fellowship at something called Public Citizen, which was like a consumer watchdog organization in DC.
Mhm.
And then I started looking for a job, and I was aiming for like environmental nonprofits, like Sierra Club or something like that. And I just had a really hard time finding a job. I don't know if it was the time of when I was looking, the recession, I don't know. But
Mhm.
eventually I just took a job at a water resources engineering firm called Tetra Tech. It was in Fairfax, Virginia, and also I split myself with another office in Owings Mills, Maryland, which for people who don't know, that's like
Oh, wow.
a
That's
bad
far.
commute. It's like a
Yeah,
horrible commute, like
it
DC
is.
traffic. It's the worst commute ever. But so I
It's
did
like
that.
LA to San Diego.
Yeah. That was one of the big things about that job. I did that for 2 years, but it was cool, and I actually intersected with EPA again. So
Okay.
Tetra Tech had a public outreach division, and the EPA was one of their biggest clients, and I don't know if it still is, but so the EPA Office of Water was one of their biggest clients. So I did a lot of work with them. They had me tied to a project on the Gulf of Mexico hypoxia issue in the Mississippi River watershed. And so I was flying up and down to help them stage public meetings, which at the
Oh,
time
interesting.
had to be in person. There's no
Yes.
technology. This is before Zoom, everyone. This is like where you had to get the
What year
hotel.
was this?
This was like, by now this is like 05-ish, 05 to
Okay.
07.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is before
Yep.
Zoom and like public comment. Like you had to stage an in-person meeting and it had to be advertised in a newspaper, a certain amount of is back then. And so, I basically would like stage these public meetings where,
Okay.
I'd help, work with the hotel and advertise the meeting and make sure their logistics for their speakers were fine. And so I did that for a couple of years and then had to get out of it because I had my first child, and it was impractical
Right.
with a newborn to be traveling like that.
Hmm.
So that's actually when I ended up at Johns Hopkins, and I just kind of
Okay.
pivoted out of environmental work for a while into service learning, which is kind of the
Yeah.
industry I'm in now. So
And you were at Johns Hopkins for a long time. You the Center for Social Concern. You were there for quite some time.
right. So I ended up at Hopkins, and at the time I kind of thought, oh, I'll just do this for a couple years until my son is older, and then I can kind of go back to environmental work. But I just kind of fell in love with working with college students and helping them kind of shape experiences in community engagement. And it
Mhm.
kind of became my next career. And just was there. I started out as an assistant director, became an associate director, and then left as an associate director, but got to help develop a lot of programs from scratch over the years.
Mhm.
The Center for Social Concern started as an office of like 3.5. It was a very small office. And when I left, it had at least 11 employees. So
Wow.
it, it kind of scaled over the years. So it was also
Mhm.
exciting to be a part of that organizational development story, and help as an organization grows with its staff and portfolio.
That's exciting. When I was working with Volunteer Maryland, I connected with the Johns Hopkins Center of Social Concern, and we were just kind of Volunteer Maryland was recruiting AmeriCorps alum or AmeriCorps members, and this Center for Social Concern wanted their students to have that experience. So we were just kind of working in all angles that we could possibly to get students involved. Did you have AmeriCorps members?
We sure did.
There?
I was about to say we took
Yeah.
advantage of well, gosh, it was the Mid-Atlantic. Well, nope,
Campus
it was
Compact?
Maryland Campus Compact, then it was
Okay.
Atlantic Campus Compact, then it was Maryland DC. It
Yes.
evolved. But
It evolved.
we were able to get vistas through what was a regional campus compact entity. And so that office had vistas every year from 2007 until I left. We had vistas, and we really used Vista to incubate. So we would bring a vista into a project. They do it for the 3-year cycle. And then it would kind of morph into being a student-led effort. So for example, we did a lot of food related projects. So a Vista would come and like help launch a campus kitchen chapter, which is a food recovery program for college students, and work with those leaders for 3 years. And at the end of 3 years, it would just be left in the hands, and then the students would take it on, and it would become sustainable. So we really leveraged Vistas to help grow our office. And also because these experiences are supposed to be self-sustaining. That's the thing. This is supposed to be self-sustaining. Though sometimes it's hard to do that when you come to rely on having vistas, but
Totally.
that's kind of how we leveraged vistas in that service.
But it's a great way if it's used correctly to like produce new programs and not necessarily put it on the staff to have to. And then the Vista member has the experience, just like you had your experience, just like I left my service year, like understanding the importance of, I don't know, connections. Funny, I called connections and networking. It's like, I can get anything done if I know the right people. So, and then the organization that Gia is talking about, it's called Transform Mid-Atlantic. And I actually work for them right now. They host Vista, amongst many things. They do host Vistas on campuses in the Maryland, DC, Delaware, and we have a Vista in West Virginia. We have a program out there, so I don't know if they have the Vista yet. So, and then we'll circle back around because you're not at Johns Hopkins anymore. And you're at a different university, and you guys are recruiting for Vistas, right?
We are. Yes, we are too.
Yeah. So you were at Johns Hopkins for quite some time, and discovered that, developing community service projects for students was something that was hitting home for you. You did something before you went to Loyola, and
correct.
Yes.
Right. And actually, this is also where Morgan State comes in, because halfway in my time at Johns Hopkins, I start working a lot with faculty on helping them build for-credit opportunities with community partners. And I was surrounded by all these professors that had doctorates. And I thought, if I want to kind of climb in higher ed, I think I need a doctorate. And so that's when I thought, okay, I should probably go back. So this is like 2012. I started Morgan State, which is a great program in their public health school for working professionals. So it's a rare program where I actually got to work full time still and was able to go to school at night. So I did that. And again, that public health thing, right? So I said, what do I want to go back to school for? And people were recommending that you have to do something that you really care about. Like, don't just go back.
Check the box. There's no checking the boxes.
Right.
Doctoral program,
because it's a long haul and you got to really love it. And I said, well, I really still care about public health. So I went back to get a public health degree. Because even though it really didn't make a lot of sense for what I was doing in that moment, most of
Mhm.
my peers were going back for higher ed degrees, because in higher ed, people would go back and get education doctorates. And
Mhm.
I said, I'm just going to go get a DrPH because I'm still interested in it. And,
Yeah.
I still, have an interest in this health piece. So, so I did that. So
And
I
did you
was,
enjoy it? Was it
yeah,
worth it?
no,
Yeah.
absolutely. In
Good.
Oregon, their faculty were really community engaged, and
Mhm.
I had great experiences in the field there with their Prevention Science Research Center. And um, it was actually, I did my research on like a anti-tobacco effort,
Mm.
which again, like that's not what I was doing in my career at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a community-based participatory research program, and that's why I was drawn to it. It
Mhm.
just happened to be tobacco related. Um,
Mhm.
but that was a great experience. So I was kind of walking myself through a doctoral program my last 5 or 6 years at Hopkins.
Okay.
So I left Hopkins because I was about to earn that degree, and I wanted to leverage it
Mhm.
for the next level of my career, to be a
Mhm.
director or something like that.
Mhm. That's exciting.
Mhm.
Such just such a great portfolio of higher education institutions. And then you ended up, this is where we kind of intersected. I
Right.
think I
Yeah,
was
that's right.
leaving, I think I
Yeah.
was leaving Volunteer Maryland when you all, UMB Cures Scholars Program, so University of Maryland, Baltimore.
Yep.
And for those folks who are maybe listened to the episode with Sade Harrison, which I
Yes.
think
Yes.
released last week. Actually, Gia, and I think Sade mentioned Gia's supervision and how much you guys really, she just enjoyed the experience. And Gia was her supervisor when Sade was an AmeriCorps member. So tell us a
Right.
little bit about UMB Cures and your
Yeah.
experience.
So I left Hopkins, and at the time I wanted something that, because I was getting this public health degree, I was trying to make sense of having this public health background, but still wanting to be in higher education. And that's a hard combination, like service learning, public health, like, so
Yes.
it just so happened the executive director role at UMB was open, and I thought, well, it's different because it's K-12 youth. Like, I've been working with college students for a really long time. And so it was a little bit of a pivot to work with younger children full time, and over 100 of them.
Oh my
But
gosh.
I was like, well, it's a great combination of like the health related piece, and still working for an anchor institution, which
Mhm.
University of Maryland, Baltimore is. And so I did that for almost 3 years. And it was a great experience, different. And it was also during the pandemic, which was really tough,
Yeah.
working with youth in the pandemic. And, it was challenging, but it was also rewarding, but super challenging because of the pandemic. But yes, Sade was there when I got there, and Sade was actually finishing her AmeriCorps year and had actually just been converted to full-time staff, which
See,
was
AmeriCorps
exciting.
is just magical in that way.
Yes.
I was also hired on at my site after my service year. I was serving in a park in Anne Arundel County, and it was one park. It was Quiet Waters Park. And after my service year, I went to the director of Anne Arundel County and I said, "Hey, I built out this program at your one regional park. Can I do it for the entire county, for all the
Wow.
regional parks?" And
Nice.
he's like, "Sure." So I worked at my site for like 3 years.
Wow.
And then, that's the power of AmeriCorps, right? It's
Yeah.
almost like you're in a 1 year interview
Mm-hmm.
with your site. It can be, and it doesn't always end up that way, right? Like
Right.
some of our smaller organizations, or even the higher education institutions, there's only so many positions
Yes. Yes.
available. So but sometimes it works out. And another intersection in our life, who I'm going to have on the podcast in June, hopefully, is John Polinsky.
Oh yeah. Awesome. Yep.
So
Yep.
he is just a rock star in all things.
Yes.
So after I spoke with Sade, I was texting John. I'm like, you need to be on this podcast.
Yeah, no, he should.
Yes, because
Absolutely.
he's an alum as well. I think it was City Year. It's where he
Great.
served in Chicago. So,
Yeah.
anyways, you're at UMB Cures.
Yes. And, doing a lot in the pandemic, we had to take a program that had been staged in person online. So we had to create a virtual version of our program for all these different groups of youth. And I was hiring people in the pandemic and telling them that they had to scaffold virtual programming from scratch. And so it was definitely a challenging time. Another interesting AmeriCorps thing was, so Sade got to hire an AmeriCorps member, and that AmeriCorps member we brought on as permanent staff as I was leaving. He converted over.
Who
This
was
is
that?
Ben Gorski.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Who he's volunteer male or most?
I think he is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But right, so it happened again because Sade left.
Right.
And then Ben kind of took her place, so to speak. So
yes.
So yeah, that happened twice, which was interesting. Yeah.
That's so cool. And maybe we can have a reunion, UMB Cures reunion.
Yeah.
And one of the things, if I remember correctly, with the UMB Cures, essentially it was a middle schooler would be mentored by volunteers, like a group of volunteers.
Yeah.
So I can imagine that feeling of being in person and having that contact was just so different. And these kids during the pandemic, my heart went out to them, because like they, as adults, we can get through like Zoom meetings, like back to back to back to back. But as kids, it's like, no, I am not doing this.
Yes.
So good for you though.
Yeah. And actually, so the AmeriCorps members were volunteer coordinators. So their job was to figure out, how do we do this virtually? How do we take what was a really hands-on program and still connect students with mentors in that virtual format? And it was challenging. We had little squares on the screen and then like a mentor's there, but they can't really interact in that same way. But they managed to figure it out. But that was a challenge for our VISTAs at the time.
We all just tried to make it work during that pandemic. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So now you're at another Maryland institute, Loyola University. Is it Loyola?
Loyola University, Maryland. Yes.
Loyola University, Maryland. Right. And again, our paths are intersecting.
Yeah, it's a small world. It's a small,
it's very much the law of attraction, right? Yes. Like the people you just keep coming back to. And what's cool is you can always go back to someone that is reliable. That like, we can get this project done. We'll jump through all of the hoops and do all of the things. So you're doing a similar position with them. You're the executive director for the Center for Community Service and Justice and the York Road Institute. So let's talk about that. And then we can also talk about how you guys are recruiting for an AmeriCorps member.
We are, yes, for two of them. And so, so I'm at UMB and pandemic is really hard. I'm like, like a lot of EDs in the pandemic, it's like, I gotta one up, like it's not even personal. It's just like, and also I kind of miss the variety, so these service learning centers, you're kind of a jack of all trades. Like you're covering issues from, the environment to, education to criminal justice. So you're kind of dealing with all sorts of issues. And with Cure, I had kind of been really honed in on one program, really hands-on, really in the weeds on one thing. And I kind of missed the variety of a center and wanted to kind of get back to something that was a little broader and a little more strategic. And so started another job search, which a higher ed job search, by the way, for people listening, is actually really difficult. It's like these interviews are like, all day and, it's, so you're trying to job search and run a program and,
I had an interview at University Baltimore, in the University of Baltimore, their law school. And it was all day. It was all day. And it was with every person that I was going to come in contact with or possibly work with. I finished with interviewing with the provost, which this was like so out of my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't even know how to refer to you, sir. Like,
Right.
It was so, and then they like took me out to lunch and I thought it was like chill time, but I realized, no, this is actually part of the interview. Like keep up
Yes.
keep it going, woman. I'm like, I'm so tired.
Prepares you for higher ed. That's what
Yeah.
it's like. No, it's not.
And also something that I'm also learning in the new position with Transform Mid-Atlantic, and we can talk about here, is that like something you had mentioned earlier was that the community service like programming on campuses is in different areas
Yes.
on all different universities, right? Like it might be in admissions at one university, but it might be in the School of Public Policy in another. And you're working with like cross-campus connections and students. So it's not a position for the weak.
Yes. Yeah. And so I'm at Loyola University now, and their Center for Community Service and Justice, we are celebrating our 30th anniversary this year.
Oh, wow.
So long track record of community engagement at Loyola. And we're kind of the one stop for all things community engagement. And we also house the York Road Initiative, which is this community development arm of the center, which works with community partners in a 2-mile radius off of this commercial corridor called York Road in North Baltimore, which is why it's called the York Road Initiative. It centers around this very narrow geography. And we have VISTAs. So VISTAs have played an instrumental role in the work we do. So we run a farmers market. We also have other food access programs, and at different times we've had VISTAs tied to our York Road Initiative doing this kind of concentrated place-based work. So we're currently recruiting for our food access work because we're trying to expand that. And we're also recruiting for a schools-based VISTA to help with a program that launched in the pandemic called the Community Engaged Literacy Program, which is a partnership with our School of Education and Aspire offices. So yeah, we're excited. Come work for Loyola. It's great.
Yeah, do your service here at Loyola. I'll make sure that the links are in the show notes for both on the podcast and for the YouTube channel as well, so that they can check out the opportunity. And will they be working with you then?
So they'll be working with our program coordinator of our York Road Initiative, who oversees food access issues, and then our associate director that's going to be overseeing the youth portion. So
that's great. Yeah. And Loyola is a beautiful campus. So
yeah.
Many of state soccer games the Loyola campus.
Interesting. Okay.
And fun fact, when I used to work in the government, I keep saying fun fact, I'm such a dork.
It is fun.
I used to work on Preston Street on the 15th floor, and I could see the antenna on the campus from my office window. So it was a beautiful view.
Yes.
So anyways, wow, this has been such a, it seems like it was just laid out for you, right? Like, oh, we'll do this and this, and we'll get a degree in environmental studies, and then we'll look into public health, and then everything kind of intertwined. And it seems like for a lot of the AmeriCorps alumni that I've spoken to, it seems like the path just unfolds for us, and it's like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be. And we also are able to take our skills and pivot or change or strategically think about what we're doing next. So I can imagine you're staying put for a while. You got a lot of work to do. We have a project in June. You can't go anywhere.
We do.
So anything else that you want to share? Anything else that you're up to? Anything that you want to share with the audience?
No, just like if you are considering doing AmeriCorps, I recommend it for everyone. Even people that feel like they're at the end of their careers. We're seeing more and more kind of retired people doing national service. So it's really just an enriching program and a great way to get exposure to something that you've never done before, or deepen your skills in an area. So just big fan of public service and really excited to have been on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I just want to double back on people who are later in their life doing AmeriCorps. You know, it had been branded as a 20-something-year-old
Mm-hmm.
not knowing what they want to do with their life. But
Yep.
I served when I was like 35 years old.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
it gave me the skills. It gave me the skills. And I always say the number one thing it gave me was confidence. Confidence that believing in myself that I could get a project done, that I could create something. You know, somebody could say, we want an oyster project, you know, and we want volunteers to take care of it. And I'm like, how am I going to do that? Right. And then after a year of being able to do it, now I feel like I'm in a position of, well, more than a year after doing that. But now, you know, it gave me the confidence of being able to say yes to things, truly knowing that I would figure out how to make it work, because we just get things done. That's what AmeriCorps members do.
Yeah.
So my final question for you is, as I'm wrangling in these AmeriCorps alumni and we're kind of pulling together our connections, what is a big thing that you think, or even a small thing that you think we could do as a group? I mean, there's more than 1 million of us who've gone through service. Is there anything you can think of that like maybe we should put on our radar?
I think, you know, mentoring people coming out of service years. So I've worked with a lot of transitioning VISTAs because they'll do a year or they'll do 2 years. And then they're often kind of trying to figure out what the next step is. And what a great network to have access to, just the alumni network, even in their immediate, you know, geography. Because so many of them are looking for jobs or trying to figure out how to discover what to do next with their year and their benefits. You know, some of them forget that they've got the government preferred hiring, but you know, like, and then, you know, maybe they'll go on for grad school, but they're not sure. So I think, you know, trying to figure out how to more systematically connect our, you know, alumni to the transitioning vistas, I think would be valuable.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I love that idea. A couple of alumni have mentioned mentoring or, you know, pairing up with an AmeriCorps member that's coming out of service. Service Year Alliance is doing, they have a new alumni corner.
Oh, cool.
So that's a place to go to get some of this higher like networking sort of things. And I know that they're working on building out an alumni network community.
Great.
So I'll drop that into the show notes also if people are interested in signing up, and join the AmeriCorps alumni LinkedIn group, because there's a lot of job opportunities there. There's so many alumni looking to hire alumni. So Gia, this was such a great conversation. I'm really so grateful that you gave me your time, and this was just a great conversation. So thank you all for listening, and until I get to chat with another AmeriCorps alum, enjoy the episodes and have a great day. Thanks so much.